Lots of it. Football talk coming up here. We know the XFL, CFL are in some kind of discussion, negotiation, whatever it is. But are these talks, conversations, connections headed anywhere? And what is the motivation behind them? Mark Perry is editor of the XFL News Hub, a source for XFL information, joining us tonight. And first of all, Mark, thank you for joining us. And let me ask right now, what are you able to share? What do you know? What have you heard about the ongoing XFL, CFL communication?
Well, thanks for having me on. And I mean, right now, things are moving ahead. Basically, what we're hearing is that this merger is going to happen. Now, there's all sorts of talk about the reasonings behind it. You know that the XFL was closed due to the pandemic, and in 2020, of course, Danny Garcia and The Rock and Redbird Capital purchased it in August. And then originally the plan was just to, hey, we're going to restart the league in 2022. It made sense. COVID's still an issue in Canada as well as an issue in the United States to get fans in the stands. So it seemed like that was the plan. One of our insiders, Mike Mitchell, had noticed that in October, Danny Garcia started following the CFL. And then as it turns on, that these guys have been talking. I know they announced last month that they were talking about talks, but actually they've been talking for a long time. And it's my understanding that Danny Garcia and Redbird Capital were very interested in the CFL for a long time.
Why are they interested in the CFL?
I think, so from my understanding is that there was when the first iteration of the XFL came in 2020, they basically got no TV deal. The production cost was covered by ESPN, ABC, Fox, and then they got the gate and other kind of things. I don't think they were able to get they didn't want to take the field without a strong TV deal. That was the whole thing. And I think they kind of went into the market, and now you're coming off of the pandemic. Part of me thinks that to have a bigger package to deliver to networks. Now, Danny Garcia and The Rock, and if you don't know, Danny Garcia is the ex-wife of The Rock. And she's kind of the brains. Yeah. Now, she's the brains behind the operation because it was her idea. She approached Dwayne, DJ, as she calls him, when the XFL went bankrupt and said, hey, let's do this. Let's purchase this. And her background of success goes way back to even before The Rock was involved with the WWE. I mean, she was a big time in the banking industry, making lots of money back then. So she knows what she's doing. And I think they were part of the thing of purchasing the XFL was the idea that they wanted to do more than just football and kind of all different kinds of content, maybe focusing on coaches, reality TV shows. We know that The Rock's got a successful show on NBC. He's had a successful show on HBO. So they have the partners, but I don't know if that was enough. And I think bringing the CFL into the fold and growing their league from 8 teams, adding an additional 9, and maybe the XFL even adds another one to the mix, having that package and also bringing in the market of Canada, I think that was kind of the selling point where, hey, now TV networks were interested in doing something with them.
Okay. All good points, Mark. I understand it. I understand the numbers. I understand the synergies that are involved. But it doesn't account for the emotion. There's enormous pushback to this in Canada that the Canadian game, Canadian traditions, Canadian roots are going to be swept aside. Does the XFL brace for that? Are they aware of that? Because, it's just been a tradition, whereas the XFL has a thin resume.
Yeah, so it was interesting in the beginning is when this announcement was made, clearly the Rock's PR people said, hey, I have some ties to this Canadian Football League. I played there, and $7 is the promotional vehicle that they to do their TV shows, and that was because when he got cut from the CFL, all he had was $7. So there is that tie there, and then also his father lived in Canada too, and they're putting that out there on purpose. I think that at least from our side of things, as XFL fans and NFL fans, I mean, I was aware of the CFL and its history. But yeah, then at least when we were stepping our toes into the CFL waters and starting to meet some of our friends up north, I mean, the tradition and and the history of the league are all big things. And I know that they're definitely aware of that as far as how they're going to make decisions. I just think it comes down to an economic thing. And one of the things I was thinking of the other day and is that basically out of all the major leagues in Canada, is the CFL the only one that does not have a component that's attached to the U.S.?
Yeah, that'd be fair. Big leagues. There's minor, smaller soccer and basketball leagues, but no, that's fair. That's a good way to describe it.
So I wonder if it's just an economics thing. Now from our perspective in the U.S. and us, especially at XFL News Hub, our focus is, and it was the saying going XFL 2.0 era, it was for the love of football. And our position always is, there needs to be a spring league. There needs to be this opportunity for players outside of the NFL. I understand, yes, that the feeder system to the NFL is college football, but those guys are coming out of the league at 22 years old, not at 26, and where they kind of develop. We've seen XFL players are now in the NFL. We've seen CFL players now in the NFL. And the question is the rules, the ratio. From our perspective, we don't really care. I think when it comes to the 4-down, 3-down thing, I think it's going to be up to the networks and who's willing to pay for it. That's what it's going to come down to. And it comes down to money. And the other part about with the CFL fans too is they've been burned so many times, and that's you get that baggage on top of it too. So I understand that fans are leery, but they have to put in perspective that honestly, this is really about the football and to be able to have that pro career going forward and having a viable spring football league.
Mark Perry from XFL News Hub joining us. Mark, but I'll throw something else back at you. Just based on what we've seen over the decades, the American mindset is football begins roughly Labor Day. It ends the first week in February. There's intense action and intense focus on football during that time. Friday night is high school. Saturday is college. Sunday is professional NFL football. Then after that, go away just for a little bit. We've seen all the football we need to see, and we'll crank it back up in the fall.
So when Oliver Luck, who was the former CEO, of the XFL came around, one of the things he said, the NFL fan base is roughly around 120 to 110 million people. Major League Baseball is about 40 million, and then NHL, NBA is in that 25, 30 kind of space. And their thought all along was, hey, if we could just get 20% of that audience, and honestly, that audience, that doesn't include college football either. Football is huge. And could you get 20% of those fans that, are out of, and come into the XFL? Absolutely. You got to think too. One of the things that I learned from doing XFL News Hub is you can write all the stories about the players and the stats and whatever. It really came down to fantasy football and betting. I was stunned as a lifelong NFL fan and NBA fan. That's really what our biggest article of the whole site was, something around the draft and something around fantasy football. So you have these guys who love to bet on football. They love to play fantasy football. But, the NFL season, by the time you get into October, November, your team's out of it. You're still betting on games, and then it's over, and you have to wait till next year. I'll tell you how popular it is. So we have Sirius XM Radio here in the United States. Sure. There's a fantasy sports channel. We're right in the thick of Major League Baseball season. Every time I turn it on at night, they're talking about the NFL. They're not talking about hockey. They're not talking about the NBA. They're not talking about Major League Baseball. They're talking about football. And I'm like, guys, football is 6 months away before you even have training camp. But that shows you the level of interest. And if you can tap into that interest in the spring, and all you have, competition, at least in the United States, is just, the NBA and NHL season wraps up, and all you have is Major League Baseball and golf, I think it's a home run.
Well, very interesting insights, Mark, from the XFL News Hub, your online XFL News Hub, and brought up some interesting points, Mark. We'll keep following this story. You're adamant it's going to go ahead. We will wait and see. Obviously, the CFL is expected to make some kind of a statement next week about the state of the season. I don't believe for a minute it's going to start on time, but we'll see. We'll follow it carefully. Mark, you've been very insightful, and we'll watch it unfold here.
Yeah, it should be exciting. Thanks for having me on.
We will. Thank you very much. Mark Perry from XFL News Hub. Interesting. Very interesting, some of the things he had to say. We'll take a time out here on Sports Talk and unpack some of that right after this.